Hello. Of course, the new government is under an extreme pressure, especially from the U.S. government. Mr. Trump, the U.S. president, has already said that Colombia has to reinforce its efforts on the fight against coca plantation and the exit of cocaine from Colombia.
Okay, and when we talk about action, what sort of things can we expect President Duque to actually do to stamp out this growing coca crop all over Colombia?
Well, President Duque belongs to a political party that is much more closer to the U.S. in terms of anti-drug, counter-drug strategy than his predecessor, Mr. Juan Manuel Santos. Colombia has three tools, if you say, or a strategy with three components that can be used in different weights, each one, to fight the growth of coca plantation. The first one is aerial spraying of the coca plantation. It was widely used, and during the past government, it was suspended out of medical reasons, out of health considerations, and it's quite probable that Mr. Duque will begin again to implement the aerial spraying of coca fields. The second one is what is called in Colombia forced eradication. This is done by the army. Last year, for example, in 2017, they eradicated the soldiers, go into the fields, and they eradicated about 55,000 hectares of coca plants. The third one, which is a result of the peace agreement with the FARC, and began to be implemented last year, is what we call voluntary eradication. There are a huge number of coca families that plant coca in Colombia that have made special agreements with the government, about almost 80,000 families to June this year, agreeing to voluntarily replace the coca plantations with other crops. Yeah. So the strategy now is, and it's a big debate here in Colombia, is which weight each one of those three strategies will have: aerial spraying, forced eradication, and voluntary eradication in the frame of the peace agreements. Most probably, given the political profile of this government and its closeness to the U.S., the two first, aerial spraying and forced eradication, will get the biggest push.
Okay, so President Duque is new in office, obviously, and as you've been saying, some of those initiatives aimed at bringing this coca surge under control are new. Some of them are not so new. We have heard President Duque saying that the coca plant is actually a national security risk. Do you think he shows signs of being tougher than his predecessor when it comes to this particular issue, Alvaro?
Yes, I could say that this is it's sure. You know, this kind of the way of naming the phenomenon of coca plantation and naming it as an issue of national security is very much close to the same. The U.S. formula, which is exactly the same. It's a matter of national security. It's obvious that coca has grown uncontrolled since, just for you to have an idea, between 2013 and last year, the coca crops went from 48,000 hectares to 171,000 hectares. It's almost it's a multiplication of almost by 4 in the span of 4 or 5 years. So the Colombian government faces a huge challenge, and it's quite probable that the strategy of aerial spraying and forced eradication will be implemented in full during, and I would say not just in full, they will be implemented very quickly under this government, which is under a very strong pressure from the U.S. government.
Let me just ask you a final logistical question, Alvaro. I mean, the United Nations says that coca production is up 17% in terms of the hectares of Colombia which cultivate this plant. And I'm just wondering, how does the UN actually go about tracking the plantations where coca plants are cultivated? How do they do that? It's such a huge area.
Yeah, actually, it's really a very interesting question, given the geography of Colombia. It's 1,000,000 square kilometers, jungle, mountains. It's a very complicated country from the geographical point of view. There are two sorts of measurements being conducted since long time ago in Colombia. One is the one that is conducted by the UNODC, the Organization for Drugs and Crime of the UN, with a program which is called SIMSI, that is in place already. This year is the 19th time the UN publishes its study, and the other one is conducted by the US. Historically, the numbers of hectares are not the same in the US and the UN studies. The US have been higher all the time. The UN has one advantage. They take satellite pictures of all the Colombian territory. I mean, it's a full picture of the country, evidently along the year. They take into consideration eradication. They can calculate productivity of coca leaf, for example, which is something that no one else does. But it is essentially a census. Strictly speaking, it's a census. The whole Colombian territory is photographed from satellites, and the information compiled and analyzed produces these studies that usually go out in June, July every year. This year we had it a bit later. The US, only takes pictures, satellite pictures of part of the territory, and then does calculations and extrapolation. So I would say that for specialists, the most accurate measure is the UN SIMSI study. Anyway, the US and the UN one have coincidence on the tendency. The growth and the rate of growth is similar in both studies.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for sharing that with us. The director of France 24's Spanish language channel, Alvaro Sierra, thank you very much for speaking to us there.